There are no ghosts here. Written by the librarianchick. Narrated by Jirou Audios. Featuring Jirou Audios and Evil Outcast.
Jeremiah shoved the camera in my face and I promptly pushed it away. He grinned at me as he hopped back and cradled the small camera against his chest.
Does this mean you're not ready for your close-up?
He asked as he turned the camera towards Rosa. She smiled at the camera and blew it a kiss. You just caught me by surprise, that's all, I said, turning away, looking up at the dark tunnel ahead of us. It was a lot bigger up close. From the road, it had not looked nearly as intimidating. Being this close, I could finally get the size of it. It resembled a dark and gaping mouth, large enough to swallow trains whole and spit them out on the other side. It was cold, too. The air blowing out from the tunnel was freezing, making it a stark contrast between the hot summer day. I could not see the light at the end of the tunnel as there was a slight curve in its center, so the exit was hidden. The cold air should have been refreshing considering how hot it was today. The heat index alone put the temperature just over 100 degrees, but I shivered as the breeze from that dark place blew over me. I could smell mold and damp coming from the tunnel as well. We were in the middle of a mild drought that summer, and I wondered how it was possible for anything to retain moisture in the suffocating heat.
So, this is the place?
Rosa said as she walked towards the tunnel entrance. She stood in front of it with her hands on her hip, assessing it like it was something she wanted to buy. So far, she did not seem to be impressed. She kicked at the gravel and sent a few pieces of tiny stones skittering into the darkness. There were old pieces of garbage littering the place, broken bottles and some sun-bleached wrappers. No graffiti though, which seemed odd to me. The whole place had a feeling of an abandoned tomb.
And I honestly thought it was going to be bigger.
She laughed as she turned back to us.
It's actually not that long of a tunnel. If you were on a train, you would be through it in under 30 seconds.
Jeremiah explained as he held up the camera. He filmed the entrance with more enthusiasm than a hole in a hill deserved.
How long would it take you to walk the entire thing?
Ashton asked from behind Jeremiah. This was the first time he had spoken during our short hike to the tunnel. Compared to the rest of us, Ashton was the most out of shape. He was not doing well in the heat and his body was covered in sweat. The walk from the road to the tunnel was long but not particularly difficult, but it was enough to work up a sweat even on a cool day. He was also carrying a backpack filled with water and snacks. We weren't sure how long we would be out here, and he had insisted on carrying it. Ashton walked over to the shade of some nearby trees and sat down in the sparse grass. He was still breathing heavily as he opened up a bottle of water from the pack, downing half of it in a few gulps.
If it's a long walk, can we take a rest a bit? I kinda need to catch my breath.
He was panting hard, even after the water, and his face was a bright beet red.
Yeah, man, take your time. I gotta film a little bit of backstory anyway.
Jeremiah answered as he walked over to Ashton, sitting next to his friend in the shade of the trees. I joined them too. The shade of the tree was much more welcome than the heat. Rosa stayed in the sun, stretching. She was the best in shape compared to the rest of us. She regularly jogged and she was decked out in her favorite Lululemon outfit, so she was barely sweating. Her long dark hair was in a bun and she wore a pair of sunglasses to protect her eyes from the harsh sun. I wish that I had brought some sunglasses with me.
Okay, We actually made good timing getting here. I was thinking that we could each do a tiny intro and say our names.
Jeremiah explained as he dug out in the pack looking for snacks. He pulled out his own bottle of water and a pack of granola. Ashton glared at Jeremiah.
Do we have to tell the viewer a cool fact about ourselves too?
Jeremiah laughed and opened his snack, taking a few bites before answering Ashton.
Nah, man, just say your name. I was thinking if the web series takes off, we could each do our own biography videos or something, but that will be in the future.
That seemed to appease Ashton, and he turned his attention towards me.
Are you okay with being on camera, Penny? I know you really don't like having your picture taken.
I nodded and gave him a reassuring smile. I'll be okay. It's a stupid phobia anyway. I can handle smiling for the camera. It won't kill me. Rosa had walked up behind me and gave me a playful pat on my shoulder as she took her own seat in the shade.
That's good. Usually it's like pulling teeth to get you to pose for a selfie with me.
She said, giving me a pouting grin before she retrieved her own water from the pack. Well, I said, starting to feel self-conscious. It's time I got over it, especially if I'm going to be in a web series. Rosa grinned at me and took off her sunglasses, winking at me as she sat next to Jeremiah.
Why did you even bring a camera, Jeremiah? We all have our phones. We can just film with them.
Rosa nudged him playfully as she stared at the camera in his lap.
I have a camera because all good filmmakers need a camera. You can't always rely on phones. And besides,
He added, grinning.
it was on sale.
Seeing all my friends snacking and drinking water was enough to make me realize I was getting hungry too. It was a good idea to stay hydrated anyway. I grabbed my own water bottle and some chips. I downed half the bottle before tearing open the chip bag. I had been thirstier than I thought.
So, here's the game plan.
Jeremiah started to explain in between bites of granola.
After our little coffee break, I'll do the initial backstory intro. Then you guys introduce yourselves. Then we film ourselves walking into the tunnel.
Sounds good, man.
Ashton said with a full mouth. He had started on his second bag of chips while Rosa was daintily eating a protein bar. Jeremiah clapped his hands together, ridding them of granola crumbs before picking up his camera again.
Well, let's get this ghost party started.
Jeremiah stood up and walked out into the sun, holding the camera in front of his face as he began filming.
It's not really a ghost party though, is it, Penny? I mean, there was never any proof that the tunnel was haunted.
Rosa questioned me. I shook my head. It's really never been confirmed that it's haunted. There were never any deaths from the construction of the tunnel. What it's really known for is the disappearances. Except for Jeremiah, I was the one who knew the most about the tunnel. I had helped him in his research online, and when the internet stopped yielding results, it was me who pored over old books and microfiche in the library. Ashton snorted.
It's not like they can actually confirm some places haunted, can they? It's hard to confirm something that doesn't exist.
Rosa gave him a questioning look.
If you don't believe in this stuff, then why are you helping, Jeremiah?
Ashton shrugged.
Because it's something to do. Besides, if he gets YouTube famous filming places like this, it'll be easy money. I'm not sure if I'm gonna make it to college like you guys.
I shook my head. You can go to college, Ashton. You're just as smart as the rest of us. He looked at me and gave me a resigned look. He opened his mouth to say something, but Jeremiah yelled over to us.
Guys, cut the chit-chat. I gotta film.
He sounded exasperated with us. We stopped talking and looked over to him. Rosa rolled her eyes at him, and Ashton made an exaggerated, lip-zipping motion with his hand at Jeremiah.
Thank you!
Jeremiah yelled back at us sarcastically before turning back to the camera. Grinning into the camera, Jeremiah began his introduction.
Hello, my ghouls. Welcome to the Midwest Occult Online, hosted by me, your boy, Jeremiah.
He smiled broadly at the camera as he droned on with his introduction. To his own ears, I'm sure he thought he sounded confident. To me, he sounded like a car salesman trying to sell me a used Toyota.
The Carter Tunnel was completed in 1933, smack dab in the middle of the Great Depression. Because people were in need of some good and reliable work, there were no shortage of laborers eager to earn a wage.
Jeremiah held up a photocopy of an article from the local newspaper. It featured a large black and white photo from the half-finished tunnel in the background. In the foreground was the eponymous Mr. Carter, for whom the tunnel had been named. He had a rather impressive mustache, and he looked sternly out of the photograph, while decked out in the height of 1930s businessman fashion.
The Carter Tunnel was named after Mr. Edward Carter III. He was the mayor at the time, and one of the richest men in the country. He had been the one to convince the railway to build here. Because of that, he was highly regarded by the citizens.
Jeremiah dropped the page and pulled forth another one from his pocket, also featuring the former mayor. This one was of him cutting a ribbon in front of the tunnel. Other men, similarly dressed, were beside him, and all of them smiled for the camera.
During the construction of the tunnel, many men complained that something was making them sick. There are widespread reports of nausea and dizziness spreading amongst the men. Because of this, there was a high turnover rate. Some of the older workers couldn't handle the sickness that was seemingly spreading around. It was only after the completion of the tunnel that the disappearances started to happen.
Jeremiah licked his lips before continuing. He seemed to really be getting in the tale. Even from several feet away, I could see his eyes glinting with excitement.
The first man to disappear was a young man named Edgar Coppersmith. He had been one of the original workers on the tunnel. His co-workers reported that they saw him enter the tunnel, but never leave. He was not reported missing until after he had been gone for a full week. Even then, his disappearance was a tribute to just running off.
Jeremiah swallowed before continuing.
There were other disappearances, of course. Several teenage boys were reported as missing, but they were labeled as runaways and no one had the resources to really look for them.
Jeremiah pulled out another newspaper clipping, photocopied from old microfiche. This one prominently featured an older woman, wearing a lavish outfit and staring out from the black and white page. As he talked, Rosa looked enraptured. I could tell that she was into the whole story.
It wasn't until a Miss Margaret Wright disappeared right off a train that people began to speculate that something sinister was happening in the tunnel. Mrs. Wright had been a wealthy widow until the recession hit. She had sold all of her earthly belongings and was traveling to a nearby town to live with her son and daughter-in-law. Eyewitnesses' accounts say that she had been seated next to the window talking to her fellow passengers. She was there when the train went into the tunnel, but afterwards, she was gone. No one could explain how a fully grown woman could disappear off a moving train in 30 seconds.
As he talked, Rosa looked enraptured. I could tell that she was into the whole story. Ashton wasn't paying attention at all, and was drinking another bottle of water. The story intrigued me, but I wasn't sure if I could really believe that a tunnel was actively causing people to disappear, though I could admit that it was exceptionally creepy.
There were other disappearances after Mrs. Wright, and they seemed to increase in frequency.
Jeremiah held up more photos and let them drop away, revealing the portraits of all the missing.
There were over a dozen different accounts of people vanishing from the trains after they passed through the tunnel. Men, women, and 2 children were simply gone. The pattern was erratic too. Sometimes days or weeks would go by without a disappearance. Sometimes they would occur just a day apart. The railroad company tried to keep everything hush-hush, but the final nail on the coffin happened in 1934. The train's conductor became a victim of the tunnel. He vanished from his post, right in front of the train engineer. The train very nearly derailed before the engineer was able to apply the brakes. He forced everyone to evacuate the train and walk to the nearby station, which was over 5 miles away. After that, the railway company closed down the tunnel after only 1 year of use. It has been inactive ever since.
Turning off the camera, he sauntered back over to join us in the shade. He was smiling and he seemed pretty pleased with himself.
Not too bad, right? I told you guys this place had a creepy backstory to it.
Rosa stared at him wide-eyed.
So what do you think happened to those people? Could they have just run away?
Ashton snorted.
It's kind of hard to run off a moving train. I bet there were suicides. It was the Great Depression. People were depressed. They probably just jump off the train.
Rosa rolled her eyes at him.
Yeah, maybe, but then what happened to their bodies? They couldn't make their own bodies vanish.
Ashton smirked at her.
Coyotes. Their bodies were eaten by really big coyotes.
Jeremiah barked out a laugh and Rosa swatted at his arm.
It's not funny! The thought of being eaten by a coyote is kind of morbid.
She shivered despite the heat. This whole place is kind of morbid though. It was almost 100 years ago. I don't think that we'll ever know what happened to those people. I piped in. Jeremiah shrugged and held up the camera.
Let's do our quick intros, and then we will walk through the tunnel. I want to get lunch after this.
Ashton drank the rest of his water and, after depositing the used container in the pack, gave Jeremiah a thumbs up.
I'll go first.
Jeremiah held up the camera and waved at him to continue. Ashton waved at the camera and gave a tiny smile.
Hi, I'm Ashton, and I'm here to help Jeremiah find something crazy tonight for you folks.
Jeremiah gave a thumbs up and turned off the camera.
That was pretty good, though I'm not sure I've ever heard you say folks before. You should just speak like you normally do.
Ashton shrugged and reached for another bag of chips. Next was Rosa's turn. She winked and posed in front of the camera.
Hello everyone, I'm Rosa. I'm Jeremiah's girlfriend, partner in crime, and a fellow ghost hunter.
Jeremiah blew a kiss at her as she finished.
Woo, really great, babe. The camera loves you.
Next was me. I smiled as best I could and tried to look confident as I gave my intro. Hi, I'm Penny and I'm a ghost hunter too. I hope we find something really spooky for you guys tonight. I inwardly winced at my own voice. I sounded far less confident than I meant to, but Jeremiah gave me a thumbs up and a smile, and I figured that what I said was good enough.
Well, I think that'll do it.
Jeremiah said as he turned off the camera.
Are we ready to get going?
Rosa stood up and dusted herself off.
Since you'll be helping with filming with that tiny camera you got, I was thinking that Penny and I could film using our phones. It can't hurt to have some POV from our perspective.
Jeremiah shrugged in answer.
It can't hurt. Besides, maybe you'll capture something interesting.
You can film my voluptuous backside with your camera.
Ashton batted his eyes at Rosa. Rosa rolled her eyes at him but didn't say anything. She walked past Ashton and motioned for me to join her. I followed along as she walked into the tunnel entrance. As we walked closer and closer to the entrance, I started to feel really anxious, almost like I was experiencing the beginning of a panic attack. Standing in front of the mouth of the tunnel, I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I wasn't sure where it was coming from. My heart started to race and I felt lightheaded. It was sudden and severe enough that it doubled me over. I placed my hand on my knees and took a few deep breaths to ready myself. Bile was rising in my throat and I breathed steadily through my nose to keep myself from vomiting up my snack. Ashton walked up beside me and grabbed hold of my upper arm. I guess he thought I was about to pass out.
Penny, are you okay? You look like you're about to puke or something.
He sounded concerned. I'm okay, I said, straightening back up. I just felt sick for a minute there.
Do you think you could have some mild heart stroke? How much water have you had today anyway?
Rosa asked as she came up beside me. She reached out to feel my forehead. She frowned as she touched my skin.
You're not warm, but you do feel clammy. Here, take the rest of my water.
She held her half-full water bottle out to me.
If you do have heat stroke, then you need to keep hydrated.
I shook my head, but Rosa fixed me with a glare that let me know she was not asking me. She was telling me. I drank the last few gulps of water to make her happy. It did make me feel a bit better, actually. Maybe I just had too much sun for today.
Are you guys ready to do this or what?
Jeremiah beamed at us as he finally joined us at the entrance. He had already started filming.
Is everything okay?
He asked me, his smile faltering as he saw the look on my face.
She might have mild heat stroke, Jeremiah. She got nauseous just now. It's probably not a good idea to do this. We should get Penny somewhere with some air conditioning.
Rosa spoke for me, her eyes looking from me to Jeremiah.
So you got sick to your stomach, huh?
Jeremiah smiled at me.
Maybe you're getting some psychic impressions from the tunnel. Maybe it's warning you to stay away.
From his tone of voice, I couldn't tell if he was joking or not.
You're not funny, man. Heat stroke is a serious thing. At least I think it is.
Ashton chimed in. I waved my hands to get everyone's attention. I'm feeling much better. Really. I think I'll be okay once we get in the tunnel. It's nice and cool in there and it'll get me out of the sun. Rosa looked at me skeptically. She didn't believe me at all, but Jeremiah seemed convinced.
I bet it's just nerves, Penny. We'll be in and out of this tunnel in 5 minutes. Then we come back this way, hop in the car, and it'll be time for some victory tacos.
Jeremiah reassured me. Rosa sighed.
Okay, but if Penny gets sick, we're leaving immediately, okay? The stupid tunnel will still be here tomorrow.
Jeremiah nodded his head in exasperated agreement.
Fine. If Penny gets sick, we'll come back tomorrow. Now, let's get walking.
With no further ceremony, Jeremiah walked into the darkness. The illumination from the camera was all he had to guide himself.
Wait up, man. I got the only flashlight.
Ashton called out. He huffed after him, lightly jogging to keep up with his friend. Rosa and I shrugged at each other and took up the rear of the procession. We opened our phones, hitting record. If there was anything supernatural in the tunnel, multiple recordings might pick up what our eyes could not. My nausea, which had abated slightly, came back full force. I was swallowing hard and breathing through my nose in steady breaths. The air in here smelled old and dead, like opening up an old trunk of clothes and smelling the dust and decay. There was a damp, moldy smell too that reminded me of wet dogs. I sped up. If we walked faster, we could reach the end and then be done with this place. Rosa tapped me lightly on the shoulder.
Are you still doing okay, Penny?
She whispered in the dark. I couldn't see her at all. The black of the tunnel was all-encompassing. I'm fine, I wheezed back at her. I just want to get out of this stinking place. Rosa let out a soft laugh.
You and me both. This place is creepy inside.
We kept walking. Ahead of us, Jeremiah talked into the camera and filmed. Occasionally, Ashton would chip into the conversation. Their voices echoed in the empty space, but I wasn't paying attention to what they were saying. Rosa remained silent. I didn't speak because I didn't trust myself to open my mouth. Suddenly, I could see the light at the end of the tunnel. We must have just passed the bend, which meant we were almost out. I didn't want to be in here any longer, and I took off at the sprint, passing the guys in my dash to the entrance.
Hey there, Penny, slow down. Where's the fire, huh? We're almost out anyway.
Jeremiah called out to me as I breezed past him. Running out into the sun almost felt like being born. The heat and the sun hit me full force. It was almost refreshing after the moldy damp. I took a deep breath of the hot summer air, then promptly doubled over and vomited onto the gravel. The guys came out of the darkness laughing. When they saw me puking, they hurried over, and Ashton placed his hand on my back.
Penny, I'm sorry. We shouldn't have gone in there. You're really sick.
He patted my back in an effort to comfort me. Once I was able to stand back up, I looked back at Jeremiah. He was grinning while still filming me. "Did you really just film me vomit up some chips, Jeremiah? That's really sick." I tried my best to glare at him, but after emptying my stomach, I felt suddenly weak. My glare probably didn't look that intimidating.
I'm sorry.
He said, turning off his camera. He didn't look sorry at all.
I promise not to put that in the final cut of the video.
Wow, Jeremiah. You are such a prince.
Ashton sneered at him. He must have been fed with his attitude just as much as I was.
Where's Rosa?
Jeremiah asked suddenly. He looked around and back towards the tunnel.
She was right beside you, wasn't she, Penny?
I nodded. I hadn't realized that she hadn't joined us yet. "She was right behind me," I said weakly. Staring back at the entrance, I waited expectantly to see her walk out of the shadows. But there was nothing. Jeremiah walked back into the entrance, cupped his hands around his mouth, and shouted,
Rosa!
The only thing we heard was the echo from his shout reverberating back to us.
Maybe she already turned around and went back the other way. Maybe she wanted to beat us to the car.
Ashton sounded unsure, but it made the most sense. Jeremiah nodded, but didn't look convinced.
Yeah. Let's head back to the front and meet her there.
Our walk back felt shorter, and we stayed together walking side by side. I kept my hand on Ashton's shoulder as we walked to stay steady on my feet. I was feeling pretty lightheaded. When we came back out into the light, there was still no sign of Rosa. Jeremiah had a look of panic on his face now. He wasn't even bothering to film anymore. We walked around looking behind the bushes and the trees for Rosa. She wasn't there. Unless she was intentionally hiding from us, we would have seen her.
Okay, we need to go back through the tunnel. Maybe she fell in a hole or something. If we don't find her, then we need to call the police.
Jeremiah was running his hand through his hair in a nervous gesture.
She's gotta be somewhere close by.
I dialed Rosa's cell phone, hoping that maybe she would answer. It rang, then went to voicemail. The fact that she wasn't picking up her phone was serious. Rosa would never intentionally ignore me, and she was absolutely not the kind of person to pull a practical joke. So we went back into the tunnel. Ashton shone his flashlight into every nook and cranny. We checked the ground for holes that she might have fallen in. Jeremiah and I used our cell phones for added illumination. We looked for her as best as we could, but we had to face the facts. Rosa wasn't in the tunnel anymore. We called the police. Jeremiah was hysterical by that point. He was calling out for Rosa, screaming her name, but it was no use. The police were much more organized than we were. They set up a perimeter and a search party was organized. We were a smaller town, so someone going missing was big news. Dozens of volunteers turned up with flashlights to help search for Rosa. They combed the tunnel, going back and forth, yelling her name over and over till the echoes were mixed together and were incomprehensible. The surrounding area was searched as well. The only trace of Rosa they found was her cell phone. It was still in the tunnel where we had lost her. People started gossiping. Rumors swirled around the disappearance. Some said it was a curse, come back to claim more lives. Others said it was the work of a serial killer, abducting people and killing them. Still, Others believed that Jeremiah, Ashton, and I had done something to Rosa. Ultimately, we were exonerated. It was the footage from Jeremiah's camera and the recordings from our own phones that proved our innocence. The footage retrieved from Rosa's phone is what saved us. Her phone showed the three of us walking ahead of her, then suddenly her camera dropped into the ground. It even went on to record the sounds of our voices as we searched for her. It was as if she had simply dropped her phone and walked away. After this evidence was found, she was labeled as a runaway. Rosa's parents never believed us when we protested our ignorance of Rosa's whereabouts. Rosa's father had followed me one day as I was in town running errands. He confronted me as I got out of my car, demanding to know what I had done with his daughter. When I kept protesting my innocence, he punched me straight in the face, hard enough to slam me back against the car and give me a bloody nose. A passerby came to my defense and drove him off. The police were called and my parents begged me to press charges against him. Ultimately, I decided not to. I felt bad for him and I couldn't fault him for his desperation. Ashton couldn't handle all of the gossip and attention that we were getting. He decided to go live with his dad for a while in another state. His social media was deleted and I think he blocked us on his phone. All attempts Jeremiah and I made to contact him were ignored. Jeremiah handled it the worst of any of us. I couldn't blame him. Rosa was his girlfriend and he had loved her more than the rest of us. One day I got a text message from Jeremiah.
"I'm going to find Rosa,"
was all it said. I tried to message him back, but they went unread and unanswered. When my messages were ignored, I tried calling, but it went straight to voicemail. Jeremiah's parents called the police when he didn't come home that night. He was quickly labeled a missing person. The police found his car by the old tunnel, abandoned with no sign of my friend. His car keys, wallet, and phone were all left on the car seat. It's been several weeks since he's gone missing. I don't think that they'll ever find him. Wherever that darkness in the tunnel eventually leads, it never lets anyone come home.